get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here.
The views expressed by J. Michael McCoy are the views of the hosts and guests of Max World Live, and not necessarily the views of Webcast One Live, its staff, its management, the cleaning crew, Dave the electric guy, the guy who cleans the skywalk, the woman who brought in the cookies, the management staff of Hubble Real Estate, the parking lot attendant at Keck Parking, the wait staff over at Miss Kitty's, the coffee crew at Frederick's, the man in the street corner willing to work for food, Rob Spearman, Max Crabb, or anyone else of sound mind. Should you be offended, provoked, intimidated, shocked, confused, or just made to think independently, log on to MaxWorldLive.com right now. It's your voice we want to hear in Max World. And now, live from the palatial studios of Webcast One Live, your host, J. Michael McCoy.
Well, as you can see if you're watching the show, this ain't J. Michael McCoy. It's Tom Coates doing his level best to substitute in for the once again absent J. Michael McCoy. Now, we do have the benefit of an outstanding guest today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to introduce you to him in just a minute, but this is Tom Coates coming to you from Webcast One Live, Max World Live, View from a Pew, and everything else. But our guest today is a distinguished gentleman with quite a pedigree. His name's Kayne Robinson. Some of you will know the name. Some of you locals may remember him as a former police chief. Many of you that followed especially the gun issues over the years will remember him as his role of the president of the NRA for some years. Kayne, I don't have in front of me all your bio. I want you to spend a few minutes and introduce yourself on what you've done in the past and perhaps what you're doing today.
Well, thank you, Tom. I spent a lot of time in Des Moines. I was actually the assistant chief of police, but 33 years on the police department. Had a wonderful career here, and we had a great police department, and I think still do. The life that I had and still have turned out to be very interesting. A lot of the things that I've been able to do, myself and others also volunteer to do for free. All of the things that I did with regard to firearms rights and competitions and things like that, most of the people actually do as volunteers, and then a few people eventually work their way into the corporate operations and get paid for it. Police department's the same way. We always had here a very large number of reserve police officers that do it for nothing, that go out there and work to help protect the city. And I actually did that for a short time myself, and then became a police officer, worked my way up through the ranks, and was able to do it professionally. Same thing in politics. I was the state chairman of the Republican Party, and I've been the chairman or an official in many, many campaigns over the years. Of course, most of the people, and myself included, start out in those things as volunteers. So I've been very lucky to do things that I wanted to do so badly that I did them for free for a long time and eventually got paid for them.
Well, and you served as assistant police chief. I was thinking that I was remembering that you were the police chief, but I remember you were very involved in some of the local organizations. I remember one time being at a luncheon meeting. You and I sat across from each other, and I don't remember what the meeting was, but I remember looking across you, and I remember you were wearing a Rush Limbaugh tie, and I was wearing one myself, and we looked across and flipped it over.
That's right.
Both of us had
They were hot for a while. You had to have a Rush Limbaugh.
I wore mine for the Christmas party again this year. It's a tradition with me.
It's about like having a coontail on your around your mirror in the 50s. You had to have one of those.
That's right. I don't think you or I either one wear ties as much as we used to either.
That's right.
Now, you and I bumped into each other just last Friday. In fact, Mac had texted me and said he thought we'd had a guest this week, and we didn't. We've got Will Rogers, who was at the very same establishment that you and I were last Friday. We were at a place called the Cigar Club over on Ingersoll, place where fellas congregate to light up a fine cigar. And, in fact, I was there talking to Will Rogers, who's coming on next week, and he says, find me somebody. I looked over there, and sitting there in the back, sitting next to Rob Tully, an infamous individual, has been on this show on more than one occasion. Former head of the Iowa Democrat Party. You mentioned your past background as the former head of the Iowa Republican Party. The two of you were sitting there talking. And
it's an interesting deal. Everybody thinks Republicans and Democrats spend all their time fighting and throwing knives at each other. Back when I was the chairman, Rob was the Democrat chairman, and we actually became very good friends. Rob is a terrific guy, and we became good friends, but we also worked together on many, many things, most notably the idea of the Iowa caucuses. The Iowa caucuses are a very big deal to the entire state.
Exactly.
When we did one of the caucuses that I ran in 2000, we credentialed, actually physically handed a credential to 800 press people. And you can imagine, if you project that across the roughly 2 years of a presidential campaign in the state, all of the motel rooms and the gasoline and the meals and all the things, it's a very big deal for the state.
Big deal.
Plus, it is a very big deal to tell the rest of the country about Iowa, about how we live and what our concerns are. And both Democrats and Republicans do that. And the candidates leave, and they leave knowing a heck of a lot more about us here, not just about Los Angeles and New York and Washington, D.C. and places like that.
Well, we do carry a big stick. Some people in the country think we carry too big a stick. They were complaining recently about some of the influence we were exerting on some of the Republican candidates as it regards to the ethanol issue and some other things. And I don't disagree that we probably do carry a disproportionate stick when it comes to these guys. But if those are our interests, and we're representing not just Iowa but the Midwest Farm Belt, it's just flyover country. If we weren't first in the nation, they would ignore our issues a lot more. I'm not saying that ethanol is even the issue we want to fight over, but it is an issue. Now, before we leave the club, and I came over and asked you if you'd be willing to come in, you were kind enough to agree to come in and do Mac's radio show. For those of you that are listening that are interested in cigars, what's a man like yourself normally pick out? What kind of cigars do you like?
I tend to smoke Upmans. That's typically my deal. I don't know just why I got into them a long time ago. Friends usually introduce you to a new kind of a cigar,
right?
And that's typically what I smoke. Before that, I did Macanudos, but I switched to the Upmans, and they're good cigars, and that's pretty much my deal.
Okay, all right, okay. I've smoked the H. Upmans. There's a number of others that I tend to more go to. In fact, the guys at the club on two different occasions, Kayne, back in the early part of this last decade, traveled down to Honduras on two occasions.
Really?
And the first time we stayed on the Camacho compound. You know, familiar with the Camacho line that was bought out by Davidoff a few years ago. And that was when the Arroyos had it. They were originally expatriated from Cuba, and they were from the first ones that started the cigar line down there in Honduras. Interesting stories there if we had time. The other one was Rocky Patel, and we went down there and stayed. Rocky was kind enough to host us for a few days, and a bunch of the guys from the club stayed with Rocky for a few days.
NRA has some kind of a deal with Rocky Patel, a line of cigars, and they're great cigars.
They really are. In fact,
I get to Las Vegas once in a while, and there's an outfit there called the Las Vegas Cigar Company, and they make them right in front of you. They actually make the cigars there, and those are pretty good too. They're not, they're good cigars. I
understand, and it is fun to, because we would go through all the different stages. You know, they say 100 pair of hands will touch the cigar on each, on all the different stages where they grow it in the fields. They bring it into the aging barns, and then they ferment the leaves, depending upon which they are, in bales, and then you go to the factory where they're rolling the cigars, and it's quite an education. There's a lot to it, and there's a reason that they're made down in Nicaragua, Honduras, and Dominican, because the cost of making that kind of labor-intensive hand-roll cigar would be astronomical. We sometimes can pick them up at $5, $6, $7, $8 or $10 a stick. You couldn't touch them for that if we had to pay American labor prices. Right. So that's an issue. Let's go on before we hit into this first break, and I want to talk a little bit about your time with the NRA. We were talking before we got going about your experience with the NRA. and you've been a hunter and a gun enthusiast probably most of your life. Law enforcement was probably a part of that. Tell us how you first got involved with the NRA.
Well, I don't know when I first became a member, but I became a life member in 1959. I was 16 years old.
Wow.
And I got involved with, I think, a 3-year program where you could, and it was $60. And it took me 3 years to buy my life membership. And, I'd been a member, an individual member, sporadically as a very young kid. But I grew up in Wisconsin, right on the bank of the Mississippi River, and our whole life was I was raised by my grandparents. And what we did was make a living on the river in commercial fishing and trapping, and we did hunt guiding, duck hunters and things like that. So guns were a normal, everyday part of our life. And, of course, it was a very small town and a rural community and a dairy thing, and every milk house had a gun in it. And this is just part of life in rural America.
Sure.
And so I became interested in the civil rights aspect of it also. NRA is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in America by a country mile, membership, age, or anything else. And so I became interested in that is defending the Second Amendment and defending the right, and even as a small kid. And I think that's one of the reasons that I joined. I was always involved in politics, even as a kid, 16-year-old kid. Uh-huh. And so that was pretty much that. Well, eventually I got in the police department and became involved here, and I became the president and executive director of the Iowa Sportsmen's Federation, which at that time was the major affiliate of NRA in Iowa.
And we're talking about what year roughly would that
have been? In the early 70s.
Okay.
And then through various complicated means, I got to know Harlan Carter, who was then the executive vice president of NRA. The titles at NRA are a little bit unusual. When General Grant started the organization, he didn't want to run it on a day-to-day basis. He was the president, so he created the job of executive vice president to run the organization.
Oh, it was the General and former President Grant that started. I did not know that.
Yeah, he had about 3 or 4 of his officers in before he. General Burnside was the first one, and a number of others, and then eventually, after he was done being president of the United States, he became president of NRA in his own right. And General Sheridan was president, Phil Sheridan, and so there's
other notable names from the Civil War.
Yeah, Winfield Scott Hancock, the hero of Gettysburg, was president. And so, in any event, Harlan Carter at this time was president. We became friends. He was the chief of the Border Patrol, the United States Border Patrol. And so I got to know him, and eventually the nominating committee nominated me to the NRA board.
And what year would that have been?
That would have been 1982, I think.
Okay.
I'm not great on chronology.
Well, I'm just looking for rough
about
chronology.
1982.
Okay.
And roughly in that time, Heston got on the board also, and we became good friends.
All right, so you were both board members back in the early 80s.
For a long time.
Okay.
And then eventually what happened is that Heston and I ran to get into the officer chairs. I had been chairman of the Legislative Policy Committee and all kind of other policies. It was kind of fun when I first got on the board. The incoming president was a fellow named Jim Reinke, and Reinke was the main power behind running Eastern Airlines, and he was one of those bigger than life figures that I learned a lot about. And he took under his wing about 5 or 6 young NRA board members. I was one of them, and we became what were known as Reinke's Raiders on the board. We did his stuff. And we all eventually became president of NRA, except for one fellow who was head of the finance committee who tragically died out in his farm field. But that was our deal.
Well, and that's where we're going to be picking it up after the break. And I want to visit with you a little bit more about your ascension into becoming eventually the president of the NRA. I want to talk about your association, your memories of working with Charlton Heston, a Hollywood icon. So we're going to be leaving and going on a break here in just a minute, ladies and gentlemen, and coming back to you with Kayne Robinson, past head of the NRA and currently still an active member in some areas of GOP politics. So Hang with us. This is Tom Coates subbing in for J. Michael McCoy, Max World Live.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart, and it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
Nope, still not J. Michael McCoy. Tom Coates here, sitting in for J. Michael McCoy. Webcast One Live, doing it without the Mac. Our guest today is Kayne Robinson. Kayne was just starting to share with us some of his experiences as he started into the some of the hierarchy of the NRA back in the 80s. And what Kayne was telling us is that he was involved along with one of the real Hollywood icons, Kayne, was Charlton Heston. The audience will know him from any number of it. The Ten Commandments, starting off what's become a kind of an iconic movie, Planet of the Apes. They've made a lot of sequels to that. The Omega Man, any number. He was, I think, back in the day, it seemed like Hollywood had some real giants. We can look at the Humphrey Bogarts, the Jimmy Stewarts, the Bob Hopes, the John Waynes, these kind of people. And Charlton Heston was every big as iconic, I think, as any of those people that
That's
we're
right,
talking
yes.
about. And you said that you and Heston came together and you were a team ascending to the hierarchy of the NRA. Tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Well, determined between the two of us and some of the other leadership of NRA that some changes in the ascension of people that were in the chairs to become board and eventually become president would be appropriate, and that's a long and complicated story. But the fact is that Heston and I ran against people that were there and defeated the people that were there in the middle of their terms. It's normally a 6-year spread of time.
And a natural ascension.
And it's a natural ascension, except that you have to run each time, and you can lose the election. Now, not very many people do, but you can lose the election, or you can win the election. And so in the middle of the whole thing, we defeated people that were already in office. And Heston was elected first vice president. I was elected second vice president. Then a year later, we advanced where he became president and I became first vice president. And in any event, then he ended up spending 5 of the normal 6 years as president. And then I was first vice president for that time and then was elected president in my own right after that. Mm-hmm. He was a fantastic guy to work with, a very serious business guy, in addition to obviously being a tremendous, iconic actor. But he had been the head of the Screen Actors Guild, the principal union of people in Hollywood.
Like Ronald Reagan.
Yes, exactly. And had run other things. His own operation, of course, was a large business. In addition to being being an actor and being the artist in it, he was also
so his production company was involved in the making of some of his movies. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
kind of like John Wayne was, Bat Jack with John Wayne?
Yes, he didn't have that kind of a company, but all of the serious actors, that are in the top category are effectively running a business in addition to being an actor. Some of them have chosen to have production companies like Eastwood with his and
Eastwood's another good example, and another icon from Hollywood.
And so in any event, he was very successful in running that business, the business of being an actor and all the things around it. And there are a lot of employees and how you make all those things work. So I learned a lot about leadership from working with him and Reinke, who was one of the principal people in Eastern Airlines, which at the time was the largest airline in the world, except for Aeroflot in Russia, which was the only airline.
And I want to stop there because I do want to come back to Heston, but we've got our AWOL host on the line here. I want to go to him at this time. Mac, I hit the button.
AWOL?
AWOL, absent without leave.
Now, the last time you said I was AWOL, I was in South Dakota with my family. Now I'm working on something really important, and you call me AWOL.
AWOL, absent without leave. J. Michael McCoy. But anyway, we're sitting here. Are you able to listen to any of this where you are right now?
Yeah, I am, and I have a question for your guest.
Yes, sir.
It seems that what the...
Wait.
I can hear.
Okay, you hear? Okay. Go ahead, Mac.
How are you, sir?
Very good.
Good. Don't listen to what Tom says about me, okay?
Okay, he said you were absent without leave, so I just called the Shore Patrol.
Oh, good, yeah. So here's my question. It seems that the people who want limited to no gun rights in this country have now gone after the ammunition, because those of us who are gun enthusiasts seem to not have noticed that we can have all the guns we want, but we can't buy the ammunition. When do you think the NRA and other such organizations are going to start understanding or at least viewing it from the perspective that we can have our guns, but there's nothing to shoot out of them? And I'll hang up and listen to your answer. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling in, Mac.
Okay, well, there's a very good answer to that. The day-to-day activity of NRA, just like all civil rights organizations, is to protect the rights at the outer rings. If you get down to where you have to stop the ban of the very last gun, you've lost the battle. And so we spend the biggest bulk of our time protecting the outer rings, the small attacks that come on things like ammunition, for example. Many years ago, Congressman Biaggi from New York introduced a bullet ban bill based on this phony business of so-called cop killer bullets, bullets which had never, ever killed a cop. And they wrote the bill. That was the announcement that's made. That's the way they present it. And they wrote the bill in such a way that it would ban any bullet that would penetrate 18 layers of Kevlar, which is, at the time, a standard police vest. Now, the problem with that is they said just a bullet. And a bullet, of course, is part of a cartridge. And they were thinking of handgun ammunition, but that's not the way the bill was written. The way the bill was written is any bullet. Well, any centerfire rifle cartridge of any kind will penetrate a police vest. In other words, all of the ammunition used for deer hunting, at least in Iowa and the southern tier of counties, any centerfire rifle, 30-30, 308, 30-06, 223, any of those will penetrate a police vest. Handgun ammunition, most of it, as we think of handgun ammunition, will not. Well, so they wrote that bill. Well, NRA got involved and got the bill changed to the point where it dealt exclusively with handgun ammunition, which was the best we could do. When you're lobbying, you don't get to dictate. You get to affect the direction of things sometimes if you can get the public behind you, which we did. Well, the truth about that strange situation is that there are rifles made for virtually everything we think of as a pistol cartridge and pistols made for everything we think of as a rifle cartridge. For example, there are pistols, many, many pistols used in competition and hunting that are 30-06 and 308. Thompson Center sells thousands and thousands of hunting pistols made for hunting fairly large game, commonly in 308 and other rifle calibers. You can get a .458 a Magnum. I did research on it years ago. I don't know how you would shoot it, but you can buy it to shoot essentially an elephant gun cartridge in a pistol. So the distinction which we normally think of, 9mm, 38, those kind of things are pistols, 30-06, 223, and so on are rifles. That distinction does in fact exist, but not technically, because there are pistols made for everything we think of as a rifle cartridge and rifles made for everything we think of as a pistol cartridge. That goes back to just after the Civil War, when the 4440 cartridge was the most popular sold, and the Western cowboys and others carried a 4440 pistol and a 4440 lever-action rifle, right, because they didn't have to have different kinds of ammunition then.
Right.
So that distinction exists as just colloquially, but not literally. And ATF has seized on it now in order to say that, well, since there are pistols made for the 223 green tip ammunition, we will ban it. That was a trial balloon, because then they could have banned virtually everything we think of as a rifle cartridge based on that premise. I think they're backing off of that right now. We
got word today that they are backing off now, Kayne. And you say it's a trial balloon. Tell us about is this primarily the Obama administration that is seeking a backdoor way to do a gun control act?
Sure. They've been trying to figure out how to do this and do it in a way that doesn't make people enraged in the country, because they've had their fingers burned in the past.
Well, there's no more group more fervent than the gun owners, I don't think, for getting exercised.
Well, there's about 125 million gun owners in the United States. NRA has about 6 million members. And so it's a good representation. If you take other organizations, having that many would be a pretty good representation. And the general idea is that NRA spends a lot of time, a lot of effort preventing people that want to ban guns from getting their toe in the water. They don't come at it in the central issue of banning all guns. They come at it around the outside edges to nibble away at it.
And small steps. And that's the way that the liberals have been successful in the past. They don't want generally to bite the whole thing off at once. They take, as you say, small nibbles at it. They've got a long-term view. they seem to be very happy to make very small strides, and before you know it, they've got their mission accomplished. And the NRA, as you say, has been very vigilant in regards to this. We would consider it chicanery. They consider it something else, I guess, but it's some of us that are, I guess, a little bit more jaded think of this because all through history and in recent history, populations have been subdued, and in some cases, mass genocide has been executed because the populations were disarmed. I know they think that's far stretch for this country, but it's hard to have full government control over the populace that's armed, isn't it?
Yeah, if you go back and study the origins of the Second Amendment, that was the primary reason for the Second Amendment, was that an armed population would make it very difficult for a tyrannical group to take over the government of the United States and oppress the people. Now, you have to put yourself in the frame of mind of the people that wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Every government that they knew throughout the world had turned into a tyranny that abused people and hung them and killed them. And they wanted that to not happen here.
Well, and also, didn't they write in they wanted the manufacture of the armaments and eventually the ammunition to be made in this country? They didn't want us to be beholden to a foreign government for those manufacture. Am I right there too?
Yeah, it's not in the Second Amendment debates as much as the other parts of it, but it was discussed many times that were dependent on foreign, particularly on England, and of course we just went through a battle with England when all those things were cut off, that were embargoed, and they knew the difficulties with that, with beginning a country when you couldn't ship things in.
Exactly right. We're going to be coming back after this next break with our guest today, Kayne Robinson, former head of the NRA and some other areas of his pedigree, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tom Coates. I'm sitting in for I won't call him AWL anymore. J. Michael McCoy did call in and identified himself with a question. So I'm sitting in today, and we're going to be coming back after this break. Webcast 1 Live, Max World Live.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
No, still not J. Michael McCoy, and I'm not sitting in a pew today. I'm sitting actually up in the pulpit. Sitting in the great J. Michael McCoy chair. It's awesome. It's awe-inspiring, ladies and gentlemen. I wish all of you could have this experience at least once in your life before you pass on to the next world. Kayne Robinson's our guest today. We were just talking off mic, Kayne, about the was mentioning the climate change. I happened to see a movie last. I took my wife out on our date night. We went to see a movie called Kingsmen, and it had a gentleman playing in the role. I can't think of his name all of a sudden, but he was kind of like the Al Gore character, and except he had more money and more power than Al Gore, and it was he also was much smarter than Al Gore, and he was convinced the world was coming to an end because of man-made global warming, and what he was going to do, he was going to, in essence, murder billions of people so that we'd erase all these people that were infecting the world. Start with a small group of I guess, contributors.
I'd probably do it.
Yeah. Some of his key people, and going to start the world over, just like Noah on Noah's Ark, how he likened himself. And again, they had this character cast as the Al Gore type. Again, more money, power, and smarts than Al Gore, but a similar character. So anyway, we were talking about that and how the winters have been a good bit colder and rougher than expected, so now they call everything climate change. And I've learned, Kayne, that if it's too wet, too dry, too hot, or too cold, it's all the fault of man, and we need to generate more money going into the federal government, a bigger, more intrusive federal bureaucracy, so that they can control this and take care of you, right?
Yes, it does help financially when you get very, very wealthy advocating it and then getting the government to invest in your companies, which then go away a year or two later. And it was very interesting when I was around several thousand years ago. We had glaciers all the way down to Chicago, but our cars got so far out of hand that it caused those glaciers 20,000 years ago to melt and to go recede way up to Greenland and places like that, way above Hudson's Bay. And but that was 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. but you cannot believe the kind of cars that they had then, which caused that the glaciers to recede.
Well, I remember the character's name, Samuel L. Jackson, and he played a pretty good bad guy. And again, it was interesting to me because this is the first movie I remember seeing them actually put the environmentalist wackos in the role of the bad guy. Normally Hollywood, which we'll get back to now about Hollywood, normally puts only conservative white Christians in the role of the real evildoers, and it's the good guys that are concerned about saving the planet. So I was kind of interested that this one kind of reversed itself a little bit. Let's get back to what we were talking about earlier and before Mac called in. You were telling us about your ascension with Charlton Heston, and you were describing the man that many of us grew up watching in the movies, Charlton Heston. The movies, the Ten Commandments, as Moses, Planet of the Apes, the Omega Man. We could go through a long litany of his starring roles, and a real Hollywood icon. And again, I hate to say it, but it seems like the exception to the rule is the person that stands tall, cares about basic morality. Hollywood assaults our senses, our fundamental values on a regular basis. They do it on TV, they do it through the movies, and I think they've been successful to a large degree in declining the morality of this country. Tell us a little bit more about your relationship with Charlton Heston.
Well, Heston, if you go back and take a look at his life, was interested in civil rights all of his professional life, of which there's a terrific record. He marched with Martin Luther King. He was interested in that aspect of civil rights, firearms rights, the whole business of the First Amendment, which related obviously to Hollywood and those kinds of things. And he was active in all of those components for many, many, many years. And he did it through using his personality, as in marching and things like that. He did it in his contributions, in his personal contributions. He did it as a spokesman when he was head of the Screen Actors Guild and president of NRA, and even while he was a board member, and in many other ways. So he was somebody very much interested in individual civil rights.
And you've used that term a couple times now as it relates to gun rights. I think perhaps some of the people might be surprised that you're calling it a civil right.
Yeah, NRA is more than anything a civil rights organization. If you look at the NRA's budget and the number of employees involved in activities and things like that, the civil rights aspect of NRA is the biggest. You know, we are involved in shooting competitions, in training, in safety, in many things, but the civil rights component is the core of NRA, protecting the Second Amendment.
A gun enthusiast, a conservative man, I think a lot of people today would think that excludes him from the marching and the concern about the racial civil rights, but you didn't see this at all at odds with the personality of Charlton Heston.
Absolutely not. He was deeply involved in all of those things for many years, and of course there are others involved in NRA that have been also.
Okay, we've got another caller here. Can you? We're going to go to our regular contributor to the show, a fellow named Frank. Frank, are you with us now?
Yeah, are you hearing me, Tom?
Yes, can you hear him, Kayne? Yes, we can hear you, Frank. Frank, go ahead. And this is The Voice, by the way. We were just talking off the air about shows that are on this platform. Frank, you have a show. Let's plug it. It's called The Voice. It comes on when?
Frankly Speaking Live, and that comes on Friday at 5:30 p.m. And I've officially, by Michael Mudloff, I've been renamed The Verse.
Oh, I thought you were The Voice.
Well, I'm both. Whichever you pick, The Verse, The Voice, whichever suits your fancy. Hey, did you guys happen to catch the Oscars, and did you catch Patricia Arquette up there browbeating and chastising conservatives, I suppose it was aimed at, because of women are vastly underpaid? and what she failed to mention is that Hollywood leading men make somewhere between $40 and $100 million per picture, and women stars make a pittance of that. And of course Hillary Clinton, she pays her female staffers on her staff 72 cents on the dollar that men make. So would you think it would behoove those guys to clean up their house before they come over trying to clean up ours?
Kayne, I don't know if did you watch the Oscars? I didn't, Frank, but I did read the comments. I'm familiar with the comments that this Arquette woman was making. I guess some of the other Hollywood starlets cheered her on. They thought it was great. They said this was probably in some ways the most political. Now, they've had a lot of far-left political Oscars, Academy Awards in the past, but this apparently was about as far left as it got.
Well, and then you had Meryl Streep, the woman who never, there's a camera. Meryl never, Meryl loves every camera there is, like Chuck Schumer. But she stole Patricia Arquette's thunder because she got up and started clapping like a seal, and the camera panned over on her the whole time and paid attention to her and totally, blew Patricia Arquette off. So old camera hog Meryl Streep stole the thunder.
Well, and I understand Phyllis. Let me see. Who was it? Which is the lady that passed away this last year?
Phyllis Diller?
Was it Phyllis Diller that was the conservative? Was she the one that died this last year?
Well, if Phyllis Diller passed away, I think she was a conservative, but comedian, conservative. Or no.
It wasn't Phyllis Diller. Who was it?
Are you thinking
the one that almost came in for Johnny Carson?
Oh, you thinking of Joan Rivers?
Joan Rivers, that's the one I was thinking of. And apparently, because she was conservative, they left her on the cutting room floor as they were doing their tributes. But Frank, we appreciate your your call. I guess I'm getting the music for the next break here. I kind of got lost in that. But Tom Coates, I'm subbing in for J. Michael McCoy, Webcast 1 Live. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back for one more segment.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart, and it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
Tom Coates coming to you from the great J. Michael McCoy chair. We were just talking off the air, Kayne. That's not what I'm going to spend this last few minutes with you, but you were talking about Charlton Heston being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which took our beloved President Ronald Reagan as well, and many of our, like I said, my father's been diagnosed. Many of our people right now are going down this path. You said when you were traveling with him, he was set to speak at a large gathering, and you said he blanked out, forgot what he was going to say.
Well, it was years afterward, but he knew he was supposed to speak. He knew a lot of people were waiting for him. And all of a sudden, for a moment, didn't realize what he was supposed to do. But he knew everybody was expecting him to do something. Mm-hmm. And it was when I first realized what a terrible thing that would be. You know, we all forget our car keys. You know, we got to walk back and you're exasperated. Oh, my God, I want to walk all the way back upstairs and get my car keys. Yeah. Well, that would happen with someone with Alzheimer's with very important things. Well, except they would know that it happened. You know, they don't know all the details of what they're going to do, but they know, and they're embarrassed, and it just tears them up.
Sure. My dad has no short-term memory. He can remember things that happened 20, 30 years ago pretty well, but what he ate 5 minutes ago, he doesn't remember.
And while he was with us at NRA, I mean, he would go into fantastic detail about civil rights things that he'd done, about guns that he'd owned, about all those things, and then a few years later, very quickly, a lot of that went away. Although, like you say, the long-term memory still stayed.
I hope we can find a cure for that in the not-too-distant future. I showed you before we started the show, Kayne, about the today's Register lead editorial about Ferguson, this thing that Holder and the Justice Department came out with. You had a chance to glimpse over it. Give us your thoughts on this whole Ferguson. There was a shooting more recently in Wisconsin. There was one in New York. Your background as an assistant police chief, years in the police department. Give me your impression of what's being painted as a general racist tone throughout many of the metropolitan police departments in this country.
The first thing you learn in the police business is that the facts do matter. And so when you have an incident of any kind that happens, you really have to investigate it and investigate all the sides and understand what happens. And frequently your first impressions or your prejudices will become exploded. They're not what it really is. And of course that's what happened in Ferguson. Everybody was going to hang the officer, and it turned out that the investigation showed that the officer acted properly. I think that may happen in the one in New York by the time it's over. Now the Register and others have said, well, okay, our general impression wasn't right, but there is this general thing, and this reminds us of this general thing. That's a very interesting extrapolation, but there may not be much basis to it. Because Larry Flynt publishes a pornographic magazine doesn't mean that we extrapolate from that all the people in the news business and the publishers of newspapers are terrible, or if the Register were to publish something that turned out to be false, that everything that they do is a lie. That wouldn't be accurate. And so extrapolating nationwide things out of a couple of incidents is not very smart, I don't think. My own experiences here, the Register has an obsession with this issue, and they are so sensitive to it that they will turn virtually any incident into a racial incident if it has that component, into a negative one against law enforcement or against other agencies. Generally a great newspaper. There have been some tremendous reporters and other people there, but this is an area where they have a complete blind spot. I mean, they destroyed officers' lives here. We have a fellow named Harkin that was involved in a very similar incident. He was 100% right. They hounded him for a year or more.
Wow.
And there are other incidents of that. And it's too bad they refuse to let the facts get in the way of their crusade to create the impression that law enforcement is all racist.
Well, let's put it this way.
True.
Much of their assertion here, and the Justice Department assertion, was that a disproportionate number of arrests, of stops, of incarcerations are done to the black population, disproportionate to the percentage of the population that they represent. I think you have to look to some degree at where they're coming from. If 75 to 80% of the black births are done out of wedlock, compared to maybe 30% of the whites, which in my judgment is too high on both ends. But when you've got not an intact family, and you've got many of these young black men living on the streets in gangs, you can expect a disproportionate amount of chicanery going on with these fellas. And when you say, well, you know, and you start quoting percentages, you're failing to look at where they're coming from. Now, I'm not saying that the blacks are disproportionately predisposed to a life of crime, but their environment predisposes them to. What's your thought on that?
Well, you know, many social scientists have written books on this subject and have taken all different kind of positions. But I think when you look at the national crime statistics for very serious crimes, Part 1 crimes, and you take murders and rapes and robberies and things like that, where there's very likely to be a trial, there's very likely to be a very, very serious investigation that's going to determine the facts, well, those results are quite similar. That is to say, some populations, for whatever reason, seem to be more prone to having those kinds of crimes committed, both as victims and as perpetrators of the crimes.
Good point.
More black people are killed
By far,
as victims of crimes, proportionally in population. More are robbed. More are victims of the terrible dope epidemics and things like that.
Right, and we don't hear about the black-on-black crime like in Chicago and the other cities. We hear about the occasional white-on-black violence perpetrated by police officers or individual citizens, like happened down in Florida with the Trayvon Martin thing, where Obama said if he had a son, it'd look like Trayvon. After I saw not a 12-year-old picture, but a more modern-day picture, I said probably right. Kayne, we're wrapping up the show, and I really enjoyed having you in, and it's never long enough when we have an interesting guest like you, and we could talk a long time about some of your past activities. Is there anything else you want to say in the closing seconds here?
No, I just, as regards law enforcement, my position isn't to get involved in the black and white part of it, but just to observe that in my personal experience, very few police officers, regardless of what their personal views might be, make arrest decisions based on race. I just haven't encountered that. I'm not just saying there aren't people like that in the country, and if there are, they have no business in law enforcement, very clearly.
Well, and of course, it's hard to put a blanket on, on millions of law enforcement officers all across the country. But by and large, they're good men and women trying to do the job that they're sworn to do. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a real honor having Kayne Robinson on the show today. This is Tom Coates, been subbing in for J. Michael McCoy. Webcast One Live, Max World Live, View from a Pew. It's hard to keep track of all of it. But we'll see you again next week when Will Robinson is scheduled, Polk County co-chair of the GOP, scheduled to be our guest. Thank you.